Welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer, author of Shadowrunner. My guest today is David Rabin. Born in Chicago and raised in its Lakeview neighborhood, he later moved to Atlanta, where he worked as a trial lawyer for 33 years. Now retired, he writes fiction, runs a competitive shooting program, and competes in rifle sports, including the discipline of high-power rifle, in which he holds 2 high master classifications. David belongs to the Atlanta Writers Club, the Chicago Writers Association, the International Thrillers Writers, and Sisters in Crime. He and his wife, a former clinical social worker, have 2 grown children, and In Danger of Judgment is his debut novel. I'm so glad that you could make it. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is really exciting. I know I met you at the Atlanta Writers Conference. Didn't get to talk to you very long, but I was very interested and went right home and bought your book. Then I was sad
nice.
because I had the chance to get it signed, and then I just got caught up and didn't get back into the room.
I will give you another chance.
I'll bring it with me. So let's just jump into your book. For listeners who have not discovered you yet, let me set the stage. A Vietnam veteran seeks revenge on his former mentor turned Chicago drug lord, while police detectives race to stop a brutal drug war. Hidden motives collide in a thrilling and explosive tale set in 1987 Chicago, and I can attest to it being a thriller for sure, and fast-paced. Very nice.
Thank you.
So can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a crime thriller. It's set in 1987 Chicago, and I set it there because I grew up there, and I knew a lot of places that I thought would be good settings for the book. You spend 18 years there. When you're a kid, you walk, you ride your bike, you learn all the little ins and outs of the neighborhood. So I felt like that would be a good setting for the kind of story I wanted to tell. The 2 protagonists are 2 Chicago police detectives, an older man and a younger woman, and they are investigating a series of drug-related murders. What they don't realize is that the drug lord they're investigating is part of a much larger story, and another part of that much larger story is another man who is circling around, who seeks revenge on the drug lord. And by the end of the book, the detectives and the drug lord and the other man are going to collide.
See, and I'm not completely finished. I'm like more than 3/4 of the way through the book, but not all the way to the end. So
okay, yeah. I won't give you any spoilers.
No spoilers. Plus, I want our listeners to look you up and try to find you here. And you're not hard to find, by the way. So what inspired you to write this particular book?
It goes back about 30 years. So it's kind of a long story, and I'm going to cut it down.
That's all right.
Because people aren't going to want to hear the whole story. This goes back to the early 1990s. And at that time, I was a litigation partner at a law firm. My wife and I had 2 young kids. They're now grown men. And one day, for no particular reason that I can think of, an idea for a story popped into my head. I was not planning on being an author. I was not planning on writing a novel, but there was this story running around in my head. And I would think about it during idle moments. I'm in the shower, I'm driving, I'm waiting in line somewhere. You know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
And your mind kind of wanders, you're looking for something to think about. So I would kind of entertain myself by thinking about this little story. And after a while, I thought, I wonder if I could turn this into a book. But reality intervenes, and when you're working, you have young children. I did not have the time or the energy to sit down and write a book. Besides the fact that I knew nothing about how to write a book, so I thought, this is not really the time. But someday, I'm going to retire. Who knows when? But I'm going to retire, and then I will write the book. It was one of those far off goals. Okay?
Yeah.
So 20 years pass. And I'm thinking about that book like every day. That became my way of distracting myself when I wanted to not think about law or trials or whatever. I could think about the book. Often it was the last thing I'd think about before I went to sleep at night. And you probably know that same thing, right? You can't get it out of your head. So the downside was I thought about it for over 20 years before writing it, but the upside was I had it figured out by the time I started writing. I knew who the characters were. I knew what they looked like. I knew how they talked to each other. They were my imaginary playmates for 20 years. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So finally I retired, and I kind of goofed off for a couple of years and didn't do much of anything. And then I thought, I can either think about it for the rest of my life or I can write it. And I knew if I did not write it, I'd be really mad at myself. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write this now. And then I realized I've got some problems confronting me here. One of which is I know nothing about how to write a novel. I never took creative writing. I wasn't an English major. I've read novels. That's all I knew. That's the first problem. The second problem was when I was creating the story for 20 years, it was sort of a theoretical thing because I hadn't started typing yet. And I realized once I sat down and started, there were a lot of subject matters I knew nothing about that I wanted to include in my books. So that entailed massive amounts of research that took a lot of time to get through.
Yeah.
And because I'm paranoid about making mistakes that somebody's going to say that's not true or that's not authentic, God knows, I didn't think 10 people would ever even read the book, but I was afraid somebody would read the book and say, you got that wrong. So I consulted with a Cook County, Illinois prosecutor. I interviewed Chicago police detectives. I consulted with a neuropsychologist because the book has psychology aspects to it, as you probably figured out because you're 3/4 of the way through. Some retired military personnel. And, I ran things by them. I got their approval. They gave me pointers. So that gave me a certain, a security blanket. It made me feel better that somebody was passing on saying, yeah, you got this part wrong, but you can correct it by saying X. Yeah. So I did all this research and I'm starting to write it. And it's a scary feeling, as you know, when you actually start writing the book, because you've spent all this time thinking about it. I mean, in my case, hundreds and hundreds of hours thinking about it. And it got to the point where it was this great big thing in my brain. And I thought, now I'm going to start writing it, and I'm not going to be able to do justice to the hundreds of hours I had spent thinking about it. I was going to be a failure. But I soldiered on and started typing it. Now, at that point, I had no intention of trying to get it published.
Yeah.
My goal, my original goal actually was I'd use a vanity publisher. You remember those? Okay.
Yeah.
There was no self-publishing industry in the 1990s. There were hardly even computers in the 1990s. But by the time I started writing, I'd heard about self-publishing. So I looked into it and I thought, this is perfect. I will self-publish, give copies to my friends and family, put it on Amazon. Maybe I'll sell 2 copies. And that was sort of my plan as I was writing the book. I didn't think anybody would ever want to publish my little book. So 3 years later, I finished the research. I finished the first draft. At that point, I felt successful. And I still go back to that as being, I was a successful writer because I finished writing a first draft.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that.
Different people go into it with different goals and different measures of success.
Yeah.
And to me, everything that has happened after the first draft is gravy. It has been unexpected. It's been the icing on the cake. It's been great all the way through. So I finished the first draft and I give it out to some friends and family that I knew I could trust to be candid with me.
Okay.
Which I later found out were called beta readers, but
yes.
at the time I knew
there you
zero.
go.
I mean, I hate to sound like a rube, but I was a rube. Okay. So
we all were at some point.
Everyone starts somewhere, right?
Yeah,
you got to start
exactly.
from zero. Okay.
Yeah.
So I give it out to my friends and family, and I said, I want you to tell me everything that's wrong with the book.
Okay.
And they did.
Yeah.
And there were some long conversations about that. And sometimes it's painful, as you know, but they made that book a lot better because they thought of things I hadn't thought of, things that they did not understand that I understood because I've been thinking about them for over 20 years. So they really made the book better. Yeah. So I'm getting my feedback from the beta readers, and one of my beta readers said, why don't you try to get this published? And that was sort of like the first time that thought had occurred to me. And I thought, I'm retired. I've got nothing but time on my hands. Why not give it a shot and just see where it goes? And that was when I made the best decision that I made on my author journey, which was I joined the Atlanta Writers Club.
Yes.
And I started going to the monthly meetings. I started going to the conferences. That's where I started to learn about the craft of writing. They were talking about things that I had no inkling of. Things like point of view, and body beats and dialogue tags. And I thought, oh my God, what I felt like I was the only person in the room who had never heard of these things. So I'd furiously take notes and I'd go home and get on the internet and research all this stuff. So now that entailed a whole bunch more rewriting. And I started going to the conferences. I learned how to write a query letter and how to pitch an agent. And I met with agents and acquisition editors. And I trod that path for about 3 years. And I got some interest. I got, some requests for manuscripts and all that. But the basic response I got was, I like your writing, I like the story, but it's not the story I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And we hear that a lot
Yes.
because every agent and publisher has sweet spots that they're looking for a certain thing for this market today, not the market of 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you've got to be in the right place at the right time to some extent, okay, in addition to having a good story. So I'm going through that rigmarole, and I decided, I wonder if there are publishers who will take manuscripts without an agent. So I started looking to that, and I said, oh, how about this? There are some publishers that will let you submit directly. So I started on that, and that's when I got a bite from Black Rose Writing, who also publishes you.
Yes.
So that, I sent it's like an online query thing. I gave them my standard pitch, and they asked for my manuscript, and I sent it, and they said, we want to publish it. And I thought that I had just taken a trip to the moon and back. Probably the same thing or similar to what you went through. Okay, somebody actually wants to publish my lead story. That was a big day. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So then, as you know, you go through the pre-publication process and editing and
so fun.
polishing. Oh, that is tons of fun. Okay. And did you use the Pro Writing Aid software?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I used that, and it caught some stuff. And then I hired a human editor to proofread it, who caught a lot of stuff. My blind spot is verb tenses, and I know it, and I can't do anything about it, but she caught them all. And, assuming that there are some people listening to your video who are aspiring authors and want, advice about stuff to do, let me tell you that there is one potential problem with a book, only one, that is curable with money, and that is hiring a proofreader.
Absolutely.
You read reviews on Amazon. Some people don't care about editing, but other people care a lot. And they will give you a bad review if the editing is off. But you can fix that with somebody who really knows how to proofread. So that would be kind of one of my words of advice for aspiring authors. So I went through that process in the cover design, and on August 4th last year, a day I'll never forget, my little story actually came out to the world, and it's been a great ride ever since then.
That's awesome. And I've seen you making appearances and stuff, and I think that's really great too, because this program is about that. Because my background is that I did publicity for authors for years. I got drafted by a friend of mine. I didn't know anything about it. It was supposed to be a one-time, I'll just do this for you now. And then the next thing you know, he sends you another person and another person. And that's what I did for years. And then I wasn't writing. I was writing, but I was sticking them in the drawer. But what ended up happening was when I started looking for a publisher, I had all these clients, and they were all willing to read for me. They were all willing to edit for me. They were all willing to do all of these disciplines. It still did cost me to hire a professional editor. But yeah, it's a long process.
Yes, it is.
And then when you get it out the door, now you have to sell it. So yeah. But I will say that Black Rose is pretty fair with us with PR.
Yeah, they are, and they have it down to a science.
Yeah.
When you sign up with them for a while, I'm getting an email every week, like clockwork. Do this, do this, do this, do this. I had no idea that all this stuff had to be done. Yeah. And they've got a really well-oiled machine there.
They do. No, and I think I forget what his name is. That I think might be Chris. One of them is doing the PR primarily, and he calls himself the PR ninja, and he is. He's a ninja. So he's awesome. But you have to have a good book, and this is a good book.
Thank you.
It's not something that I would normally have picked up, which is a question I want to ask you coming up here. But because I was in the author world, I was reading for people. I became a beta reader, And I was reading for other people, but then they ask you to read their book and you're like, well, I don't really read crime fiction. Well, yeah, but I do now. Okay, because I've read good stuff and yours is very good. I
Thank you.
started, one of the people that I started reading that really got me into crime fiction was Kathy Stager-Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you know her. So
Sure.
yeah. But anyway, really good stuff. So, so you didn't plan to become an author. You just had the story rattling around in your head.
Yeah,
Was it based on anything that you had experienced in real life?
not at all.
Nope.
The,
Just
the, 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 the whole thing is fiction from beginning to end.
okay.
I can't even tell you exactly what the creative process was because stuff would just occur to me. I don't know what your process is, but sometimes I'd be stuck at a plot point or something. I can't figure out how to get out of it, and I'll be mowing the lawn and it pops into my head. I guess my
Yeah.
subconscious is writing in the background somewhere. Um, the one thing that I can say made its way into the book that I didn't come up with on my own. As you know, a part of the story revolves around the heroin trade in Southeast Asia,
Yes.
in an area called the Golden Triangle. And do you remember a show in the 80s called Miami Vice?
Yes.
Sonny
Oh my
Crockett.
God.
I know you haven't thought about this in
Oh
40 years, right?
no. Oh,
Miami
wow.
Vice. Well,
Oh.
I was a big Miami Vice fan. I mean,
Oh.
every Friday night I had my VCR program to record. You remember VCRs too,
Oh, yes, I
to
do.
to record that show. And in the first season, they had a two-part episode called Golden Triangle.
Oh
I had never
gosh.
heard of it, or if I had, I'd never paid attention. But I was fascinated by it.
Wow.
So when it came, my process to get a little bit granular was I came up with the characters first.
Yeah.
And then I decided I need a story to go with my characters. I need a story that will be a good vehicle for my characters. And I thought about the Golden Triangle. I
Yeah.
thought, you know what? I'm going to set part of it in the Golden Triangle and have it revolve around the heroin trade. So that was kind of the one thing I plucked out of my experience. And the rest of it I made up.
That's awesome. So before you became an author, who were your favorites to read? And has that changed since becoming an author yourself?
Um, I broadened my horizons a little bit since becoming an author because, like you, I'm reading from other authors and not necessarily genres that I would necessarily read. And I feel like that's helping because I see
Yeah.
different ways to write novels now. But if the question is, who inspired me or who did I pluck styles from or something like that, I'd say Stephen Hunter is one
Okay. Yeah,
who's
I
written
see that.
above. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is Michael Connelly.
Okay.
Both they are very different kinds of authors. Connelly is a former journalist, and his
Mhm.
books are almost like a documentary.
Mhm.
Stephen Hunter was a copy editor and a film critic for many years,
Yeah.
so he loves the English language, and he is so good with words, and he has this style with lots of words and long sentences and paragraphs, and he's just a master of words.
Yeah.
And then you have Lee Child, who often writes sentences that aren't they're just sentence fragments. So you've got people on kind of different parts of the spectrum, and
Yeah.
they're all effective. So I sort of drew a little bit from each one of those as the need arose in the book. I thought, okay, how would Stephen Hunter write this scene, and how would Lee Child write that one? I kind of, I won't say I copied them, but I was inspired by them.
So were your characters entirely fictional or were they based on anybody?
Entirely fiction.
Entirely fictional.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think that's always fun because I've had a couple of people identify themselves as somebody, well, one person in particular, and it's okay for me to say this because I've cleared it. And it's not the character you would want to be. And she said, that's me. And I said, what? You think that's you? And she said, yes. And I thought, well, okay. But then later I asked her, why do you think it's you? And she said, it's not necessarily the things she does, it's the way she speaks.
Oh.
So then I had to think about this. Is
Mm-hmm.
that her? It could be, because one of my vices as a writer is I love overhearing conversations, or even when people are talking. I try, if somebody uses a turn of a phrase or a word I haven't used, or economical wording somehow, I will take the time to go write that down or put it on my phone someplace, and I keep lists of things that people have said that I just thought were so clever. And I don't plagiarize them, but they're an inspiration for like, how did you put that together? Is that a cliche, or did you actually do that yourself?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting when you're in real life, everybody has a different speech pattern.
Yeah.
No two people really speak alike. But when you write, you know, you have to have each character have a different speech pattern in order for it to be realistic.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do because you have a tendency to want to speak the way you speak, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I have to kind of get myself out of that and say, okay, I have this image of a character. It's like I'm watching the movie and I'm listening to him talk. How would he talk?
Yeah.
So I get him to talk that way.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest parts for me, I don't know about you, was what they call finding your voice. How do you
Yes.
want to express things in your book?
Mhm.
And the image that I have when I started writing and I was trying to develop my voice, I'm thinking about like those old like 1950s and 1960s black and white crime dramas on TV,
Yeah.
which as a kid I just gobbled up, you know. And they would have a narrator with a deep booming voice with
Oh
this
yeah.
kind of rat-a-tat-tat delivery just to make it all seem grim and somber. And that was sort of what was running in my mind when I was trying to figure out how I was going to express things. And I tried to sort of emulate that old-fashioned grim crime drama.
So if a producer called you and said, we want to turn this into a movie or a television program, who do you want to play who?
You know, I'll answer that question with the caveat that this is really a hypothetical question because
Oh, everybody says that.
everybody says that, even though we all hope it immensely.
Yeah.
There's the male police detective who's named Bernie, you know, because you read part of the book. I could see him being played by a guy who played a homicide detective in The Wire. I don't know if you ever saw The Wire on television.
I did see The Wire. Which one?
This is the one. It came out like in the early 2000s. It's set in Baltimore. It went on for 5 seasons. It was on HBO originally.
I probably know who you're talking about, but I'm so bad
yeah,
with names.
I'm not sure I could call up his name right now. He's not a real famous actor, but he would be perfect as
Okay.
Bernie. He's got the look. He's got, you know, the large physique. So he's my choice for Bernie. For Marcel, who's my female detective, in my fondest dreams, I would have Gal Gadot play her.
Okay.
We would have to do something about the Israeli accent. We could get around that. And I'm sure she'd work hard at it in order to get the part. But she looks like my image of Marcel.
Yeah.
And she's got the martial arts ability that my character has in the book. And for the part of Robert Thornton, who is, as you know, the bad guy, Malcolm McDowell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not the Malcolm McDowell from A Clockwork Orange, but today's Malcolm McDowell
Yeah.
with the
Oh,
white
yeah.
hair and the beard, and he's very good at being scary.
Yeah, scary is good. Creepy is not, but scary is good.
Yeah, I could see Malcolm McDowell in that role. So
yeah,
there's my actors. Delaney Williams is the name of the homicide detective. It just flew
oh,
into my
good.
head.
Because I was going to have
Delaney
to look it
Williams.
up. Delaney
Yeah,
Williams.
he was a minor character in The Wire, but he was one of the people in that precinct who was a homicide detective, and I thought he'd be good for it.
Yeah. Why I ask is because I've had a couple of people who are writing coaches. I've participated in some, activities, and one of the things they do is they have you look up who would play your character, and it seems like, well, because you're trying to be humble, you're like, oh, no, but really you do have in mind what these people look like. And why I ask in an interview like this is because I know that your readers are picturing people, and if you could tell them what they look like that way, they may see it a different way. So I always like to think
who do you want to have play your characters?
Actually, the funny thing is, during this coaching session, there is no actual actress that would be the right age in this, but it was an interesting exercise because my writing coach asked me to find an actress, and I couldn't find an actress. She doesn't look like anybody whose name I know. But I did find an image of a child, and I thought, well, that's definitely her. I mean, it was definitely her. It's like if It's what I saw in my mind. And then I went looking for somebody who would age out looking like her as an adult, and I found this other picture. And so I sent both of them in, only to find out that they're the same person.
Wow,
Yeah.
that
So
was
that's weird.
interesting. Yeah.
And then, so funny thing was, I showed it to a couple people to see what they thought, and they said, "Oh, that's definitely her." But my husband was the one, just out of the blue and for no reason. He had seen these pictures. We weren't even talking about writing or anything. We were cooking, and all of a sudden he says, "You know those pictures from that assignment?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's, "That's her."
Huh.
And I said, "Sadly, she's a model. She's not an actress. I don't have that problem yet." But yeah, if the casting director was to ask me, I'd say, "I don't know, but go look at these."
Well, there are a lot of former models who became actresses. She could do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure she speaks English. That could be a problem.
Mm, yeah.
So there's that.
It's
But
interesting that you found somebody who aged exactly correctly, though. There's something fatalistic about that,
it was very strange to me. It's one thing to have your pick a person and they're that age for the whole book, but if they are a child to start with,
Mhm.
and then they become, that was very strange to me.
Yeah.
Very strange. So, how has being an author changed your life?
Well, it's given me a lot more to do.
Yeah.
In between, you're doing kind of the author, you do, the signings occasionally. I don't do that much. I do it from time to time. You're doing various kinds of publicity work. I had to start a website, help, construct that. I keep that up a little bit. And in the midst of all that, I'm trying to write book two. So, after I retired, I thought I'm never going to have another job. And it's sort of like having a job, but it's a job you really want to have.
Yes.
There is some work in it. There is some
Yes.
work in it.
Yeah.
It's not all just pure fun, but a lot of it is fun. The writing is fun.
Yeah.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the writing. I love the editing. Writing is like giving birth for me, but the editing, once it's on paper, now you're just making it right. I love that. I hate book signings.
Why?
I just don't like being the center of attention. So if anybody finds me at a book signing going, "Hi, that's me," I would really rather be somewhere else.
Oh,
So
it's your time to shine, though.
yeah.
You put all this work into it. Let me ask you this: when you edit, do you edit like right after you've written something, or do you wait till the end?
Oh God, I used to edit in the moment, and you're never getting anywhere. And the story is getting away from you. And then I read a quote, somebody sent me a quote. It was an editor friend who said, I think William Safire said this, "Just write it, then it's not going anywhere." So then I stopped editing in the moment, and I just put it down.
Mhm.
Because you want to do those perfect sentences, but if you for you, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's like taking dictation. It's like watching a movie and you're trying to write it
Exactly.
down,
Exactly.
and then if you don't write it fast, and I can type as fast as you can talk, so I am a typist. So and that's what I sound like when I'm writing. It's like
Hmm.
Richard said I sound like a secretarial pool. So yeah. So how about you? Do you edit?
Um, I'm a slow typist. I never learned how to type, so I have to look at the keyboard. But I'm like you, where when the inspiration strikes and you know what you want to say, I'm just going to
Yeah.
get it down there. It may look awful after I get done typing it, but I can always go back. But one thing I do is when I start a writing session on a particular day, I start by editing the last thing I wrote,
Oh,
because for me, editing is easier than creating.
yeah.
And I've had like maybe one cup of coffee at that point. So to kind of get the writing gears going, I'll go back and edit something, and then I sort of get warmed up
Yeah.
to start typing something new.
Well, you're very disciplined. If I was to start editing, I would spend the whole day editing.
Well, I, I thought I would never finish editing that book. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but every time I looked at the manuscript, oh, I need to change this. And I thought I'm never going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
10 years from now, I'm going to find something else. But I don't know how this happened. It's at the point now, I knock on wood, I feel like I don't want to change anything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's a really good indication that it's a very well written book, because I don't know about you, but by the time I got done reading, or got this ready for publication, I was so sick of my own book. I just didn't want to read it anymore. I actually took 6 months off. We were traveling, And my husband was really ragging on me. We were just traveling around the country, and he finally said to me, one day he got the computer out and he says, batteries are charged. We have nowhere to be. Sit your butt down and write, because I haven't seen you writing in a long time. And he was afraid I would quit. So yeah, it's really good.
Are you writing another one?
I am. How about you?
I'm about 20,000 words in.
Okay.
I'm a slow writer, though. I don't have 27 years to write the second book. So I feel like I have to kind of get on this, you know.
How many will there be, do you think?
I'm planning a second book and a third book.
Okay. Okay. And are you going to keep the same characters?
The ones who survived the first book, yeah.
Okay.
As you know, a lot of people do not survive this book, but
Yeah.
I am bringing back the characters.
I hope you don't pull Game of Thrones. I get all invested in a character and he kills them. So,
Well,
uh-oh.
can't make any promises. I mean, one of the reasons you like Game of Thrones so much was because you never knew what was going to happen to one of them,
True.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I did. And actually, I guess it was my husband. Yeah, he was watching with me. We don't usually watch the same things. He will love your book because he likes crime drama, but he likes like forensic files and stuff like that. He wants to know how they caught the guy. And I like the kinds of things that are totally character driven. But in my stories, the ones that I watch over and over are the ones where the character is always safe. I don't want to worry about Data dying, okay, or so yeah. But I got into Game of Thrones and I did find some kind of thrill in that. I can say that in yours I haven't been ever where it's not like you didn't prepare us, so it's not like it's a giveaway, but at the time it was thought, well, yeah, that's where this was going. I mean, that was the right way for it to go. So yeah, I think so. So David, is there a question I have not asked that you wish that I had?
I can't think of anything. You've done a great job of asking questions. I can tell you've done this before.
A couple times, yeah. It's not so. I don't think of this as a podcast. I think of this as a YouTube program, and it's really, like I said, the whole reason that I do this is because I have done publicity for an awful lot of authors, and I know people, and then I've had people have asked me, well, what do they sound like, what do they look like, and what are they like personally and stuff, and I just think of them as people. I don't really think of them as authors. But when I joined the author community as an author, then I started thinking about that, and I thought, oh, people are very interesting behind the scenes, and we get to see Stephen King, and we get to see. And I've had a couple of friends who have had some pretty good success where you would probably know who they are. You would have seen them by now. And that's really kind of cool to see that people know the authors. So now I'm hoping with this that your readers will see you and hear you and see what kind of, humor you have and how you talk and how you
I hope they'll still want to buy the book, but yeah, that would be, yeah.
They will definitely want to buy the book. I would recommend the book. It's a good book.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity too. It's nice of you to do this.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to book 2, and you better put me on the list of gets to know.
Okay.
So already. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor. And to listeners, as always, I will post links below so you can find David online and in person. And David, I just want to thank you for being my guest today. It was an absolute
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Have a great one. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.